it's true. There was a two-state solution proposed by the United Nations in 1948. And if the Palestinians had accepted what the Israelis accepted, a small, non-contiguous state with bantustans, to quote Professor Chomsky, and instead had not invaded, and if the Egyptians had not occupied the Gaza, something that nobody complained about, it was literally a prison for 20 years, and if the Jordanians hadn't occupied the West Bank, literally a prison for 20 years, and had the situation gone forward as it was supposed to go forward in 48, we would not be here. We'd have a two-state solution. But what happened is it's clear that the Palestinian and Arab leadership was more interested in destroying the nascent Jewish state of Israel than in establishing a Palestinian state. That is simply the truth. And there is no way to deny that. And no amount of rhetoric can undercut that reality.
You'll notice that it starts with 1948, and I'd be glad to discuss that if you like, though it's not relevant.
Okay.
I began with 1967 for a good reason, because it's in 1967 that UN 242 was passed, and a framework was laid for peace settlements, and since then it's the way I described it.
Well, let me briefly respond, only because I participated in the drafting in a small way of 242. I was Arthur Goldberg's assistant at the Supreme Court. He drafted 242. He conferred with me and consulted with me. 242 clearly contemplated Israel retaining some of the territories needed to create secure boundaries in 1967. The UN rejected a formulation of Israel returning all the territories or the territories and kept only territories. Okay. And as the result of that, Israel accepted 242. And at Khartoum, all the Arab states and the Palestinians unanimously rejected 242 and issued their three no's. No compromises, no recognition, no peace.
If we can
the truth of the matter is easily discovered from the foreign relations of the United States, which points out that Arthur Goldberg approached the Jordanians and the others and got them to agree to accept a qualified acceptance of 242 on the condition that there would be minor and mutual adjustments with no substantial change to the map.
Okay.
There were curved lines, and it was agreed that they should be straight.
All right. What you can't see behind the podium is that both of my colleagues are armed with several dozen maps, and that could get dangerous in this part of the conversation. So I'm going to ask for some restraint so we make sure that we go directly to our participants. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ken Sweeter. I'd like to bring it to the present, and I'd like to ask Professor Dershowitz, since this was a major point made by Professor Chomsky, whether or not you believe Israel is ready to negotiate for a contiguous state, not one of three separate Bantustans.
Yes. Now, contiguous depends, of course, on whether it means contiguous within the West Bank or contiguous including a connection between the West Bank and the Gaza. Now, it was the UN that created the lack of contiguity between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. In fact, the original proposals for Israel required complete non-contiguity. The north was separated from Tel Aviv from Jerusalem, yet Israel accepted a non-contiguous state. Under the Clinton parameters, there would be complete contiguity with a circumferential highway around Jerusalem, much like Route 128. It would take 9 extra minutes to get from Ramallah to Bethlehem, then in the middle of the night through Jerusalem, because the shortest distance between two lines, taking into account traffic, is not a straight line. Now there are all kinds of creative proposals for functional contiguity between the West Bank and Gaza, including a high-tech rail line recently designed by the Rand Foundation. I have a picture of that in my book. It also looks much like the Danish railroad, a high-tech waterway, all kinds of ways of connecting all the Palestinian states to cities to each other. Under this proposal, no point in Palestine would be more than 90 minutes away from any other point in Palestine, including Gaza. It would take 34 minutes to get from Hebron to Gaza City on the rail line. That is functional contiguity. And the fact that the leader of the Labour Party for years has quit his party to join a new party, and the leader of Likud has quit his party, both in the interest of making peace, persuades me. Plus an hour I had alone in Israel not so long ago with Prime Minister Sharon, and much time that I've spent with former Prime Minister Perez, that the will toward peace is absolute and genuine. Having said that, I also believe the will to peace by Abbas and many of the leaders of the Palestinian Authority is genuine too. Thank God Israel has to make peace with the Palestinians and not with the professors.
Okay. Comment briefly from Professor Chomsky.
For those of you who want to see the maps that lie behind Meron Benveniste's and Sarah Roy's and Human Rights Watch and the European Union and other comments, I have them here. But there's a very simple test that we could try. If that's a valid approach to contiguity for the Palestinian state in 22% of the former Palestine, let's propose it for the Israeli state in 78% of the former Palestine. Let's ask who would dream of proposing that.
It was proposed. The Peel Commission proposed exactly that, and Israel accepted it.
In 1937. But in a relevant period, we're talking about today. Today, who would propose that for Israel?
When thousands of people have been killed by terrorism, you don't expect a country to go back to a proposal that was offered and rejected many, many years earlier. Options change when rejectionism sets in.
Okay, let's go to our next questioner.
Coming back to 2005, you mentioned the connection between... Oh, sorry, Professor Dershowitz. My name is Talal Salman, by the way. You mentioned the connection between Gaza and West Bank.
Right.
But I think, to follow up on my colleague, I'm not sure if this is what he meant. What about the pieces of West Bank we're going to end up with?